Picture one of the last functioning cities left years into a zombie apocalypse. And I'm not talking about some rundown settlement you'd see in Fallout either. I'm talking about a whole working city, with the power still in the wires, water still in the pipes, and a luxury high-rise downtown, where people put on tuxedos and eat dinner at a fancy restaurant while the dead pile up outside. Unfortunately, you don't live up in that tower. You live in the streets underneath it, down in the slums, where the food and medicine only show up when an armored truck rolls back in from a supply run. But down in the slums still beats being outside there with the dead. In here, you have rivers wrapping around both ends of the city, and the only way in by land gets choked off by an electric fence that runs half a mile in both directions, with soldiers watching it around the clock. Basically, the dead can't get in, and that seems like a damn good deal during a zombie apocalypse. But here's the thing, the same defenses keeping the dead out can also keep you in. Even if nobody ever spelled it out for you, that's kinda what you signed up for when you decided to live here. Alright, so today's episode starts back when the walls still felt like a blessing, when the systems inside them still seemed dependable, and while the idea of leaving sounded insane. At the same time, there was a good reason to believe that, but that entirely depends on the walls holding up, the fireworks still hypnotizing the zombies, and the zombies staying dumb. Knock any of those out, and this place becomes one of the absolute worst locations to find yourself standing. So today, we're dropping you inside Land of the Dead as an ordinary person living down inside the slums, and we're gonna figure out exactly when the city stopped being a place you could still walk away from. That said, Land of the Dead is one of my favorite zombie movies. Although most would probably rate it B tier, I'd rate this movie high A tier. So if you've never seen it, don't you worry about it. I'm gonna walk you through everything as we go. Alright, so before we start moving you around the city, we need to go over some stuff first. When the movie starts, the zombie apocalypse has actually been going on for quite a few years now. So this outbreak didn't just happen. The dead have been up and walking for quite a while, long enough that somebody managed to seal off downtown Pittsburgh and turn it into an actual functioning city again. And you have to pay credit where credit is due, because what they've done here is genuinely impressive. You've got fancy restaurants, people out in the streets living their lives, a militia holding the walls, a power grid keeping the lights on, and people who are raiding the surrounding area for supplies to bring back to the city. And here's how that machine keeps ticking. One man runs the show. His name is Kaufman. He owns the luxury safe haven called Fiddler's Green, which is where the rich people live behind their own security, and anything you drink, eat, or sleep on belongs to him. Hell, I'm sure even down here he takes credit for the air you breathe. Now let's talk about what leaving actually looks like in this movie, because it's a little bit different than the other movies I've covered in this series. Usually when I do these breakdowns, leaving means getting out ahead of an outbreak. That means being on the roads before they clog up and putting distance between you and the infected before all hell breaks loose. That's not the case in this movie though, because the outbreak has already happened. It's old news. We're years into it and you've already survived up till now anyway. So leaving here means something entirely different. Now just to be clear, I'm not advocating for mindlessly strolling out into the dead like that's somehow a better plan than staying put. I'm talking about refusing to treat Kaufman City as a permanent solution to the end of the world. Nothing more, nothing less. You need to always be one step ahead of the curve. So that means asking yourself this question: if these walls ever stop protecting me and start trapping me instead, do I have a backup plan? Alright, now with all of that out of the way, let's start walking you through the escape windows. Okay, so window 1. And my regulars know exactly what I'm about to say because I say it every time. Window 1 is the invisible window because it's the easiest one to miss. And in this movie, it's one of the worst offenders I've covered in a while. Because early on, absolutely nothing is wrong with this city. And that's the problem. The lights are still running, the trucks keep rolling back in loaded with supplies, you're eating good, you're sleeping indoors, and the dead are a rumor on the other side of the fence that's held for years. So if I showed up out of nowhere and told you to start packing your bags or plan an exit from one of the safest places left on Earth, you'd laugh right in my face, and I wouldn't blame you for it. You might not be living a perfect life like the people up in the tower, but it beats picking shit with the crows outside with the zombies. Now, what kind of sucks for the people who don't want to make a plan B is that there's actually a guy in the city who had a good read on the situation had they actually been paying attention. His name is Mulligan, and he's down there in the slums with you, trying to organize regular people, pointing out that Kaufman didn't build this place. He just took it over and kept the best for himself. And Riley sums the problem up pretty well when he says that everyone down here is scared of being locked out of the green, but he also can't stop thinking they're already locked in. So window 1 comes down to what you take from the warning down in the slums. Because Mulligan's trying to change the city from the inside, and Riley's thinking about leaving it. So neither of them are treating Kaufman's system like a final answer. Basically, you need to start thinking about how you'd get out before the day comes when you actually have to. And I know some of you might be thinking, come on, I can't just stroll out of this city with a backpack and hike north toward Canada. And you're right, but I'm not telling you to do that. The movie itself shows how hard getting out of here actually is. Riley, who runs Kaufman's supply raids and designed the Dead Reckoning, even he can't simply stroll out of here. He even bought a car so he can leave, but the next morning the car was gone. So if a guy in Riley's position position can't keep control of his own way out, a regular person in the slums definitely can't count on strutting their ass through the front gate with a backpack and a good attitude. But Riley doesn't take that loss quietly. He heads into the slums to confront Chihuahua, the man who was supposed to be fixing the car. When he gets there, he finds a crowd betting on zombies fighting over live bait. And this time, the bait isn't an animal. It's a woman named Slack. Riley steps in, pulls her out, and kills Chihuahua in the process, which gets Riley, Charlie, and Slack arrested. Once they're locked up, Slack explains why Kaufman's people wanted her dead. She's been helping Mulligan and the people organized against him. So even this little detour reinforces the same problem. Riley isn't free to leave, Mulligan's supporters are disappearing, and the slums aren't operating outside of Kaufman's system. They're buried underneath it. And just a fun little fact before moving on, Edgar Wright, who directed Shaun of the Dead, and then Simon Pegg, who was Shaun, they were both in this movie because Romero was such a big fan of Shaun of the Dead back in 2005 that he invited them to come onto the movie and play this little part here. Alright, so this is the first hint the movie gives us that the whole system is running on borrowed time. But the problem is, you're not in the room to see it. The only people who see it are the crew on the Dead Reckoning. Here's what happens. The truck rolls out to raid a place called Uniontown, and the way these raids work is the crew launches fireworks into the sky to distract the zombies. For some reason, they can't keep their eyes off them. They call the fireworks sky flowers, and they're basically crowd control via hypnosis. The zombies just stop and stare like kids at a fair, which allows the crew to simply walk through the distracted zombies and take whatever they want. And it works on just about every single zombie out there, except for one. And that zombie's called Big Daddy. He used to be a gas station attendant, and pretty sky flowers don't quite work on him. We see him watch his own kind get mowed down while they're staring at the sky flowers. You could even see the grief in his face, and then something closer to rage. Then he starts moaning at the other zombies, trying to pull them out of the kill zone and snap them out of it. Riley sees this happen on the camera and says it plain. These things aren't just walking anymore, they're communicating. But his second in command, Cholo, shrugs it off. Then the fireworks jam, and the second those lights stop, the mesmerized zombies unfreeze, and a controlled supply run turns into a slaughter. And this is when we see one of the crewmates drop one of the cheesiest lines ever.
Thought this was gonna be a battle. It's a fucking massacre.
It's so cheesy, but I love it. Alright, so window 2. This is the first real opening created by something happening inside the city. Here's how you get there. Remember Cholo, the second in command who shrugged off Riley, pointing out the zombies were starting to communicate? Well, he spent the last 3 years doing Kaufman's dirty work. He was in charge of hauling out the garbage, and by garbage, I mean the people Kaufman didn't want around anymore. And he's been saving up, because he thought he could buy his way into the Fiddler Green Tower. So, one day he brings Kaufman champagne, asks for an apartment, and Kaufman smiles and tells him there's a very long waiting list, which is a polite way of telling him to go kick rocks. So Cholo does what a betrayed man with access to a weapon does. But before he can make his move, Kaufman secretly tells his men that he won't be needing Cholo anymore. So Cholo gets the message, gathers the crew, still loyal to him, and he heads straight for the Dead Reckoning. At the same time, Big Daddy's growing horde is attacking the position outside the garage. One of Cholo's men asks if they should do something to help, but Cholo realizes the attack has opened the road for them. Instead of defending the city, they use the chaos to drive Dead Reckoning straight out of it. And once they're clear, Cholo gets Kaufman on the radio and tells him to put $5 million on a boat, or he's going to blow the tower off the map. And I'm not really sure what he wants the money for. In the old world, $5 million would be life-changing money, but in this new world, its usefulness is kinda questionable. The movie never really gives us a straight answer on what the cash is actually worth outside of Kaufman's walls, but if we want to dig a bit deeper into it, I highly doubt it's about the money. He's more than likely trying to take back power from a guy that just embarrassed him by denying him a room into the tower. You see this enough in real life. If you dunk on somebody, especially somebody with an ego, they're gonna want to try and get that back from you. That being said, let's take a step back and look at what this creates for someone down in the slums. The Dead Reckoning is gone, Kaufman is completely focused on getting it back, and Riley has been sent out with some of the most capable people left to go and get it back. So the walls are still guarded, but for a short time the people running the city have their attention pointed somewhere else. By now, whispers of what's going on would be reaching every corner of the city, and from the outside looking in, this is probably the best chance anyone has to make for the land exit. But if you weren't paying attention and didn't happen to notice the unrest, you would have no reason to move right now. Even someone who recognizes all the openings would still be gambling, because the land route is guarded, the fence runs half a mile in both directions, and the movie never actually shows a regular citizen getting through it on foot. Either way, this was the best opening the city gave you. Meanwhile, Riley is already outside looking for the Dead Reckoning when his crew stops to pick up another vehicle and some ammunition. When they get there, the whole place has already been torn apart. At first, they assume Cholo did it, but Riley can tell a large group of zombies came through the building and kept on moving. and they're heading straight towards Pittsburgh. One of Kaufman's men tells him they'll never get across the river. A week earlier, Riley would have agreed, but after what he saw at Uniontown, he isn't so sure anymore. So while Kaufman has everyone focused on the truck Cholo stole, the real threat is already making its way towards the city. So Riley tracks the Dead Reckoning through a transmitter he hid inside the truck and catches up with Cholo on Mount Washington, just as he's preparing to fire on Fiddler's Green. Riley climbs aboard and tries to talk him down. He warns Cholo that a direct hit will kill innocent people inside the tower, and if he misses, those rockets could land in the street and kill their friends. But Cholo sees Kaufman as the person who's already killed those people. Every time Kaufman's ordered him to take out the garbage, Cholo is disposing of somebody they knew, and now Kaufman wants him thrown away too. While Cholo's talking, Riley uses the truck's remote to control and disable the weapons before he can fire. Kaufman's men then turn on both of them and try to take Dead Reckoning for themselves. Once the shooting stops, Riley takes control of the truck and heads back towards Pittsburgh. He lets Cholo leave in another vehicle, but Cholo gets bitten along the road. With nowhere else left to go, he turns around and heads back to Pittsburgh to settle things with Kaufman himself. Alright, back to you though. Window 2 is still open for the moment, but the protection surrounding the city is about to fail in a way nobody planned for. The river was one of the biggest reasons people felt safe here. Kaufman was confident that the dead would never cross the river. Other than a few potential floaters, I wouldn't expect a horde to cross that thing. A river is basically a natural barrier against shambling corpses. They just get swept away. The only problem is the dead aren't mindless shamblers anymore. Remember Big Daddy from earlier? The one who wouldn't look at the fireworks? He's been leading a growing crowd of zombies toward the city and teaching them to ignore the sky flowers. He even teaches them to pick up melee weapons and guns. Then he walks them down to the water's edge and figures out the one thing nobody in the city planned for, and that's the simple fact that the dead don't breathe. That means they can sink straight to the bottom of the river and cross underwater on foot. And sure enough, that's exactly what we see them do before coming up on the other side. So the river only worked as long as the dead were too dumb to use it, and Big Daddy just figured out how to turn that assumption against the city. Alright, so Big Daddy's horde crossed the river and made it inside the city. Inside Fiddler's Green, an announcement reports a disturbance on the outskirts, then immediately assures everyone that there's no reason to believe the tower could ever be compromised. Unfortunately, that couldn't be further from the truth. People are now panicking and pouring towards the edge of the city, trying to get out, but they hit the electric fence, and with no one left at the power station to cut the juice, the same wall that kept the dead out for years now pins the living in place while the dead close in behind them. Meanwhile, we jump back to Fiddler's Green turning into a vertical coffin. What was once the safest place in Pittsburgh is now being overrun like everywhere else. And then we jump back to Kaufman. He reaches the parking garage and climbs into the back of his car. Then Big Daddy shows up, drives the nozzle of a gas pump through the windshield, and starts filling the car with gasoline. Kaufman scrambles out, throws the nozzle aside, and starts digging through his things. That's when somebody opens fire on him from the shadows. As the shooter gets closer, we realize it's Luigi. No, seriously. This guy played Luigi in the 1993 live-action movie of Super Mario Bros. On a serious note, the shooter actually ends up being Cholo. It turns out the bite has already turned him, but he still made it all the way back to settle things with Kaufman. But before either of them can finish the other, Big Daddy rolls a small fuel tank towards the car that ignites the gasoline, blowing both of them up. The man who spent years deciding who was valuable and who could be replaced can't even make it out of his own building anymore. And the fact that so many people inside Fiddler's Green died, while plenty of people from outside the slums survived is kinda ironic. The tower had the strongest security, the tastiest food, and the safest looking apartments in the city, but once the dead got inside, Big Daddy led the horde straight toward it. Alright, so what's the actual takeaway here? Well, it's this. You need to be careful with any so-called safe place where somebody else controls the only way out. That's the trap at the center of the whole movie. It's the same story even in real life. We've all heard versions of this that don't involve the dead. The neighborhood with one road in and out that turns into a parking lot the second there's a wildfire or a flood. A barrier can protect you for years and still become the thing that traps you in once the danger gets inside. And the same goes for the systems keeping the place alive. The more of them one person controls, the less control everybody underneath them has over what happens next. That's why having a way out matters even if you have no intention of using it. It's like preppers sitting on a bunch of supplies. They might not ever need it, but if they do, they at least have it. That being said, staying in this movie wasn't automatically the wrong choice. And leaving wasn't automatically the right one either. The problem was losing the ability to make that decision for yourself. At the very end of the movie, Riley's driving north when he sees Big Daddy and the remaining dead walking off into the dark. His crew wants to open fire, but Riley stops them. He just says, they're looking for a place to go, same as us. Riley keeps moving, while Mulligan and the other people from the slums stay behind to rebuild the city. One group leaves and the other stays, but for the first time, both of them actually get to make that choice for themselves. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and YouTube thinks you'll like this video. If you've already seen it, I've got a lot more dislike it, and holy crap is it bright. Till next time guys, cheers.